This is a reconnaissance survey of a study area in Ifite, Ogwari, in Ayamilo local government area of Anambra State, Nigeria. Um, the area hasn't really been surveyed at all, so we don't really have a clear-cut view of what is available on the site based on the variability in terms of whether the soil variability, the land cover types within the area, the rivers, how clear the rivers are, whether you have lots of streams within the area, the kinds of forest existing in the area. All of these things are things that we don't really have available information on. So in order to kind of get to the site and do an effective and efficient job, we need to have an overview of what the site looks like, and that's why at this moment we're using a Mavic 2 Pro drone to kind of survey the site and see what it looks like before we actually go to the field and do the actual field work. Now, of course, this is more like an audio-visual view of the site, but eventually we'll also take aerial photos of the entire site, and of course use the aerial photos to generate auto photos or auto maps that will now be used, auto mosaic that will now be used as a base map for the study of the entire area, based on the fact that there's no available base map at the moment for site study. Now, looking at the area, you can still see that there is a great deal of variability. There are areas even that have been cleared, they can still see water on the surface. These areas seem to be swampy, while other areas may not be really that swampy. Now, looking at this site, even the grassed area, you can still see channels or water on the ground. Like that area, you can still see that in as much as it is grassed, there's water on the ground, while other areas seem more like they are uplands. Now, this is the Anambra River. As you can see, once we get to the other side of the Anambra River, of course, that's the Ogwari side of the river. The drone stops and makes a U-turn and starts coming back, because for now we are not studying the Ogwari side of the river. We are more focused on the Ifite Ogwari part of the river, side of the river, of the river bank. Now, coming back, you can still see the variability in terms of the land cover types, even the trees within the river. Now, it's not really all trees that can survive within those swampy areas. These trees are basically trees that thrive under swampy conditions. Upland trees will not really thrive within those areas, just like most of the soils here, which are swampy, would only support crops or grasses or trees that have adaptation for such regions, whereas those that grow on uplands will not really survive there, and those that survive there in the swamps will not really survive in the upland areas. So within this area, you have a mix of upland areas and of course the swamps. You can see you can experience a great deal of variability, both in terms of the soil, the land cover types, the crops, the plant species. All of these things will express a great deal of variability. Now, looking at this area, you can still see that the forest is still there. When you look through the forest canopy, you can still see water on the ground, which shows you that this forest is not just any kind of forest. It's more like a swamp forest, because there's a whole lot of water underneath the canopy of these trees. And of course, like I said earlier on, not all trees can thrive here. The trees you find here are trees that are adapted to swampy conditions. So if within some areas where we have a lot of deforestation, of course, we need to kind of reforest those areas. It means we have to come here, get some species of trees, indigenous trees that will thrive in swamps, and then go back and multiply and plant them out within those areas, because you can't really get an exotic species, because they might have lots of issues related to them because of the fact they are not adapted to the local conditions. Of course, the wildlife within the area are also not adapted to these exotic trees. So usually you need to kind of source for your indigenous species from these kind of areas, so that you take the trees from the swamps, multiply them and plant them out in the swampy areas, whereas you get the trees from the uplands and use them to reforest the upland areas that have been deforested, just like these areas that we're looking at right now. Looking at this, of course, like I mentioned earlier, you can still see a great deal of variability both in terms of the land cover types, even the soils, because you can see different soil colors based on the fact that the land has been exposed. And of course, you can still see areas where you have lots of water on the surface, like this zone, because these soils with lots of water on the surface will be very, very different from the soils where you don't have water on the surface, both in terms of maybe the texture, the hydraulic conductivity, the nutrient availability. All of these things will differ, both especially in terms of oxygen availability, because in soils where you have water on the surface, you have low oxygen. So it means even in terms of microbes that live within those soils, it will be more of the anaerobic microbes. Whereas for the areas where you don't really have water on the surface, you might have more of aerobes. So what you see on the surface, both in terms of the land cover, the water, the variability in soils, will also determine to a very large extent the macro and micro fauna and flora within the site. Just like you see now, see different patches of land cover types in terms of tree-based, grass-based, shrub-based, just areas that are bare without any kind of plants growing on them, areas with lots of water on the surface, areas with forest with lots of water on the surface. Of course, you can still see the river, and of course now we are seeing the pumping station along the banks of the Anambra River. That pumping station is meant to kind of supply water for irrigation to the lower Anambra irrigation project, which is located very far from this area at Omo, Umumbo, and Aquaxis. It covers an entire area, an area of about 3,850 hectares of rice fields, developed and planned rice fields where basically swamp rice is grown. Now, this is, of course, a pumping station once more. The river is located at a lower elevation, of course, so he had to use a pumping, lots of pumps, diesel-powered pumps within the pumping station to pump water to a particular height from which it can now be channeled into a receiving basin, and then, of course, channeled via the main canal to the fields that are more under the influence of gravity this time around. So this is basically what you see on the site. Of course, like I mentioned earlier on, you can still see different patterns on the land surface, which is about the different types of ridges, mounds that are made for crop production. And of course, the rows of different crops, and some areas where you don't have rows, because basically you broadcast something like rice, for instance, is especially planted here through broadcasting, so you won't really see this clear-cut rows, especially within the site that you can see right now. The rows you see are mostly for upland crop production. That's where you have ridges or mounds made where crops can be planted. Now, this is once more the Anambra River. It's not really as small as it looks. It's quite an extensive and a large river that flows right into the River Niger, and from there directly into the Atlantic Ocean. It seems like it's a bit narrow only because the drone is flying or viewing the site from a height of about 120 meters above the ground. Now, that's the main canal through which water flows from the pumping station down to the rice fields. Now, this is the Anambra River once more. And of course, the drone is still moving up and down, getting a view of what the area seems more like, so that we'll be able to kind of plan effectively in terms of how to articulate the attendant field work that is meant to be done before we actually generate the soil survey, the soil map, the land cover map, the land use plan, the land capability classes of the site, to ensure that the land is put to effective use to avoid increase in degradation, even as we try to increase productivity and ensure environmental sustainability. Now, the drone is still moving. Now, this is the point where it starts coming right back to the point from which it took off. Now, we are coming back to the built-up area. Of course, the area is still located and the outskirts of the town, so it's not really very close to the center of the village in question. That's why you see sparse buildings. When you get to the center of the village, you have lots of buildings packed together. It's not really very planned. That's why it's more like a village or a rural setting within the African perspective. Now, on its way back, now this is a point from which it took off, and this is where we are at the moment. Now it has stopped and is about to start coming down to the ground. It's about to land and it's coming. Of course, you can see that the altitude is decreasing because the view of the ground is becoming more and more and more prominent as we move along. Now it is about to land because for now the job has been done, and we'll now kind of reorganize ourselves and know how to visit the field and make an effective use of the data generated to plan our field work. Now, thank you.